Hello world and all who inhabit it, my name is Minish. I've been meaning to make this kind of video for a while now, and with the new updated PNG models, I think it's finally time to dive headfirst into this. Also, y'all should go follow Varia Nebula on everything. Their art is super yummy, and I love these models so much. Thank you, Varia. Anyhow, as you can all likely assume, I quite like video games. More than the average person, probably. I make a hobby out of playing games, so that you can all laugh at me and jocks, or cry along with me when something sad happens. And as someone who's been playing games for over 20 years, it never gets old. Surprisingly though, despite having this video idea for a little over a decade at this point, my favorite video games haven't changed all that much. There's a few in my top 10 that I've played recently, but overall, these are games that I've grown up with and meant a lot to me as a kid and a teenager. It's honestly kinda crazy to think that even after having played so many different titles over the years, a lot of these games stuck with me and impacted me so much that they just still kinda sit at the top of my favorites list. Before I go into this list, I do want to say that this is totally subjective and, above all, just my silly opinion. If you don't like these games, think others should have been higher, or didn't care for my list, that's totally fine. Everyone has their preferences, and mine will most likely be different from yours. A lot of these games that I'll talk about today will probably not come as a shock to anybody if they know me or have seen my channel at all. In fact, most of this list can already be found in the form of playthroughs on my channel. I also want to put a big ol' spoiler warning on this video, as I'll be discussing plot points and endings to some of these games. If you're fine with that, I guess the only thing left to do is to dive right into the discussion. Let's check out my top 10 favorite video games of all time. At the bottom of my list is a game I can't believe is already 13 years old, and that's Minecraft. Now I know what you're thinking. It's such a basic and stereotypical game to have on a favorites list, but hear me out. Minecraft is just about as customizable of a game as the world itself is. You want to play things in vanilla, build a home, go mining, explore alone? That's totally valid. Want to make a world with friends and look back at all that you've accomplished years down the road? Minecraft takes your creativity and literally pushes it to its limits. Now I will admit, I'm not the best builder, I can't put up a good fight in PvP, and I know next to nothing about redstone. In fact, I usually just make a little cottage or a hobbit hole and spend the rest of my days mining, exploring, or bothering my friends on our server. What really sets Minecraft apart for me is the servers that I play on, and a big one being Shoppo. If you've seen my MineZ videos, you'll know what that is. MineZ was a fond memory during high school, and getting to play after school and on weekends with my friends was something I always looked forward to. Annihilation, Shoppo games, and even occasionally hopping on other servers like Windcraft or, funnily enough, 2B2T kept things interesting for me. For me, even in these servers, exploring and seeing what the communities had built and made was the best part of it for me. Even if I'm not the best when it comes to building, engineering, or combat, Minecraft gives me that comforting and homey feeling. Playing on a rainy day or late at night just hits differently, and when that music kicks in, you know you're in for a good time. Sometimes all you need to do is kick back, climb to a nearby mountain, and just watch the sunset.
All the world needs is me. I got my values. So you can keep yours, alright?
The World Ends With You is a niche game that I wish more people knew about. It's the black sheep of Square Enix, and even after appearing in Kingdom Hearts titles, the game still remained in the dark for quite a while. Hell, I even thought Neku, Shiki, and the rest of the squad were Kingdom Hearts original characters. That's how niche this game was. Despite learning about these characters back in 2014, I never actually played The World Ends With You fully until I played it on my channel a few years ago. Perhaps it was because I played it with my sister, but I just had a great time with it. Even after playing it only once, the characters, dialogue, story, and the entire vibe just stuck with me. I've never been a fan of the JRPGs that take place in Shibuya and force you into a different world setting, but for some reason, Twooey just feels right. The characters act exactly how you'd imagine teenagers would act, and their dialogue makes their interactions all the better. The enemies in the game are extremely creative, giving off a graffiti vibe and hitting you with all that they have. The antagonists are also so much fun, and they have amazing designs and motives, providing twists and turns at every angle in the story. The combat can be a little hit or miss, and again, it may be because I played co-op with my sister in the final remix using Joy-Cons, so I didn't have the authentic DS experience. I know, I need to play the original, my sister also keeps harassing me to do it, but I never had that many issues with it. Other than some connectivity issues with the Joy-Cons from time to time, I thought the combat was pretty intuitive and fun. The battles, pins, and gameplay made me want to grind for money and just keep exploring Shibuya. And man, I gotta say, the music? It slaps! Oh, it's so good! I don't think I've ever heard a soundtrack go this hard before. If you need an idea for how catchy it was, just listen to this.
Just dig me deep, trust me with the words. My shoulder, little by little, I feel a bit better. Let me know, set me free, feel a bit older. Just once unto the breach, dear friend, once more. Twister, bleaster, it's all over now. Psycho cane, Yuso-cane, need some more candy canes. I found some clarity. My life's too precious to live, shackled by insecurity. Now I'm breaking free.
As much as I wanted to put Neo: The World Ends With You on this list, I think I have to go with the original first and foremost. While I arguably like the N-Tooie cast and plot a lot more than the original, the sequel wouldn't have had the same impact for me if it didn't include all of the Easter eggs, throwbacks, and character cameos from the first game. Ultimately, I think The World Ends With You goes to number 9. Everybody remembers their first experience running out of the Shrine of Resurrection when they started up Breath of the Wild for the first time. For me, there were tears and an overwhelming sense of excitement. Prior to the Breath of the Wild, the only games that I had really shown an interest in were the Toon Link games, and other than Wind Waker and to some extent Phantom Hourglass, they're fairly linear games. Getting to explore and do things at your own pace the moment you get off the Great Plateau can be a bit overwhelming, and my first playthrough, it definitely was. It wasn't until the second and third playthrough that I began to immerse myself into the world and take things slow. It felt less like I was completing a game, and more like an actual quest, full of people and things to see and do. Sure, I put the Divine Beasts and the quest to save Zelda on my priorities, but the side quests and exploring were always a big part of what pulled me into the world. Seeing small Easter eggs like Linebeck Island in the wetlands or Minish Woods near the Kokiri Forest just had me screeching like the fangirl that I absolutely am. Riding a horse through a Kala or Tabantha hits so much differently when you're just taking everything in. This version of Hyrule does such an amazing job of inserting you into the world, making it feel lived in, and giving an almost hopeless feeling on top of it all. Every time a blood moon rises, I just have to stare up at it in awe, knowing that the Lionel that I killed is about to spawn right on top of me. Every time I watch a memory, or explore some ruins, return to Hyrule Castle for weapons, I just take it all in and imagine what it was like before the calamity. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's silly to do. After all, it's just a video game. But I feel like taking in the game and feeling like you're a part of it rather than a player playing a game makes it so much more memorable. The supporting characters are also incredibly endearing. You've got Riju, who has some big shoes to fill as chief of the Gerudo, Tiba, the strong-willed and hot-headed Rito, who just wants to protect his village, my fishy husband Sidon with his award-winning smile and his upbeat attitude, and the endearing Unibo, who just wants to make his ancestors proud of him. If we didn't have these characters and help them out individually with their issues before tackling the dungeons of the game, Breath of the Wild would feel a lot more lackluster. It's because of these characters and the memories with Zelda and the champions, and even some of the more memorable NPCs that I keep returning to Breath of the Wild as frequently as I do. Even if it's just to grind Lionel weapons and upgrade my champion's tunic as high as it'll go, sometimes it's just fun to return to Hyrule, watch the dragons fly overhead, and take in the beauty of it all. Unfortunately, I can't sing the same praise about Tears of the Kingdom, but maybe that's an explanation for another video. Mother 3 and Earthbound showed up in a time in my life when I needed it most. I was having a really bad fallout with a friend, and more than anything, having these games and the friends I made in the fandom really pulled me out of a really bad slump that I was falling into. For a while, I really related to Lucas and his crew, and despite the gameplay having a little bit of a learning curve, it was fun to see where the story would go next. I unfortunately had the game's ending spoiled for me, as the first thing I ever saw involving Mother 3 was an animatic of the final battle, but that doesn't mean that the impact wasn't just as painful. I'm in the lot who feels Mother 3's never gonna have a Western release, and at this point, I think I'm fine with that. Nintendo acknowledges and even encourages us to play the fan translation, so why shouldn't we? If you haven't played this game, you need to do yourself a favor. I feel like everyone, especially if you're a Nintendo fan, needs to experience both Earthbound and Mother 3 at least once, just so they can see exactly what kind of games they are and why they're considered cult classics. I will admit that whenever I play this game, the boss fights always throw me for a loop. It doesn't matter how strong I think I am, I always get my ass handed to me in certain fights. Grinding usually solves it, and while that aspect can be a bit boring, the charm this game offers outweighs the cons 100%. The story doesn't really pick up until Chapter 4, but I also think that that's intentional. Mother 3 does this excellent world building where they show the antagonist's motives, make you grow attached to the entire cast before anything major even happens, and then when shit does hit the fan, the impact of it all hits you even harder than you think it would. There's a theme here, have you noticed? I like story-based games that really like putting you in the world. I took the time to talk with the NPCs and get to know the folks of the Nowhere Islands, which, again, makes the world feel so lived in. When the residents of Tazmily start heading off to the city towards the end of the game, it leaves me feeling empty. This once small hamlet of friendly people has turned into a barren, empty town, and all of your friends up and left for the big city. It just goes to show how a game can make you feel if you go the extra mile and put yourself in the character's shoes. Mother 3 is a game that holds a special place in my heart, and I think it only has as much significance in my life because I discovered it during a bad time in my life. Sometimes, that's all you need for a game to change your life. That, and utterly depressing endings that will leave you feeling the impacts whenever you hear certain songs from the game. I had seen little to no information on Journey before I decided to play it for myself. I had seen people praising it, and it seemed like a beautiful and short game to try out for myself. Let me tell you, this short indie game absolutely ruined my life. For the better. Once again, you get the lore in this game by exploring and going out of your way to find murals in the desert. It may be a bit subtle, but it still does an excellent job of telling the story through the murals and the short cutscenes between levels. Journey has a multiplayer feature where if you and another person in your region enter the same level at roughly the same time, you'll pair up with them. Exploring with a companion makes Journey so much more immersive, terrifying, and heartbreaking. It's always fun to see who your companion was at the end of the game since you can't see their gamer tag until after the credits have rolled. Just like the other games on this list, I can't sing enough praise about the music. It's gorgeous, ethereal, and knows how to set the tone of what's happening or about to come next. One of my favorite scenes in this game takes place during the middle of the game when you're sliding down dunes through an abandoned town. Everything gets dark, and then suddenly you're shown one of the most beautiful moments I've ever seen in a game to date. Journey has a lot of these moments where you just want to stand there and take the scenery in. In fact, it's even encouraged as one of the achievements you get is by sitting and meditating for a few seconds. I'll never forget my first Journey, climbing the mountain with my friend, watching them disappear right before the last push, and having to scale the mountain by myself. It's almost more impactful than finishing with a friend. I've played Journey many times over, and at this point, it's become a yearly occurrence to play it. I've seen others do it, and I make it a goal to get to the end with the same companion, and regardless if it's the same person or not, I'll draw a heart for them in the snow. The amount of people I've seen break down and get emotional over this little gesture just goes to show what a game with no words can do to people. Despite it being a small indie title, Journey still makes it on my top 10, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forget what reaching the peak was like. When people think of Naughty Dog as a company, their thoughts immediately go to games like Uncharted or the critically acclaimed The Last of Us, which, don't get me wrong, both fantastic games. However, once again, I tend to flock to the black sheep, and Jak and Daxter is no exception. This was a game during my childhood that I had seen my dad playing, and immediately wanted in on it. Other than Super Mario 64, Kingdom Hearts, and maybe watching him and my mom play GoldenEye, this was one of the games that stuck with me while he played it. Plus, it was a game that didn't take effort to actually play. With it being a platformer, Little May was just able to pick it up and go right for it from the get-go. So what differentiates Jak and Daxter from other platformers? Nothing, really. It's a collect-a-thon with wacky characters. Collect 100 power cells and all of the precursor orbs along the way to complete the game. However, the thing that sets this game apart from its predecessors has to be the lack of loading screens. In Super Mario 64, you have a huge world to explore, but it's always transitioned by jumping through paintings to load the next world that you go to. Spyro gives you these little flying transitions before heading to another level. However, Jak and Daxter's transitions are seamless, and there's absolutely no loading times. On top of the seamless and fun gameplay, the characters are absolutely hilarious. Through this 3 to 5 hour journey, you'll meet a colorful cast of characters ranging from endearing to clinically insane. And I love them for that. Jak is the stereotypical strong, mute protagonist who just decides to go on a quest because why not? Daxter is a devilishly handsome little fella who gets turned into an Otzel after a totally preventable accident. He's a huge portion of why this game is amazing, and if you don't love Daxter, just what's wrong with you? The supporting cast like Samos, Kira, the Sages, and Gul and Maya create a world that has lore and creativity absolutely oozing from every crack. What's a zoomer? What's eco? Dark eco? Lurkers? A lurker shark? All of this is explained to you, but it still gives room for thinking since the lore isn't pushed right in your face, and I like that a lot. I wish more games and even other media just subtly drop lore and let you figure things out as you progress through. Also, I'll say it now, I can recite the entire intro to this godforsaken game by heart. I have a problem. I know.
Continue your search for artifacts in Eco. The locals possess precursor items. You know what to do. Deal harshly with anybody who strays from the village. We will attack it in due time. The sage yaps on about the precursors that built this place all the time. Where did they go? Why did they build this crap? Precursor orbs and power cells as much as the next guy. But if you ask me, they must have been real losers. Wow, how'd you get it to do that? Jak, I think we're in trouble!
Paper Mario is synonymous with excellent storytelling, amazing characters, and gameplay that always feels rewarding. It's probably why we got a remake of The Thousand Year Door, if I'm being honest. And while TTYD brings the fanbase together, the third installment is the game that actually means more to me than TTYD ever did. I know that's a hot take, but again, I chalk it up to pure nostalgia over anything else. Super Paper Mario is about where Paper Mario fans fell off, not particularly caring for the change from turn-based RPG to platforming, which is an understandable frustration. For me, I could care less about the gameplay of any game so long as the story is engaging enough. If I feel connected to the characters, that's where it counts for me. Just like with any Paper Mario game, you play as Mario and his friends, and they set out on a quest to take care of the big bad, which just happens to be arguably probably one of the most tragic characters in the Mario franchise. Without context, Count Bleck seems like a stereotypical bad guy who just wants to see the world burn. But as we play the game, we learn of his backstory with Tippy, his minions, and why he does the things he does. The prologue literally states it as a tale of love, and boy, does it do a wonderful job at pulling at your heartstrings. As it goes with just about every Mario game, even the side characters are just as intriguing as the main characters. Count Bleck's minions are some of my all-time favorite characters in media, Dimentio still being at the very top. Listen, I just got a thing for the mentally unstable and deranged, it's fine. They each have their own goals and reasonings for helping the Count, and by the end, you can see exactly what they're each fighting for, whether that be for better or worse. I'll still never forget key moments in the story, like finding out Tippy and Count Bleck were lovers, slowly building up to the reveal over the course of the game, or seeing Castle Bleck for the first time. Or how about when Dimentio yoinked the Chaos Heart and planned to destroy all worlds once and for all? Of course, the biggest shocker and twist of the game was actually seeing Count Bleck succeed in destroying Samur Kingdom, and upon going back, just seeing an empty, white nothingness with bits and pieces left over from the destruction. This game does a terrifyingly great job of setting the tone, creating a sense of urgency to find Count Bleck before it's too late. One of my best friends introduced me to Super Paper Mario as a kid, and though he's since moved on from that point in his life, it still means so much to me. It was the thing that kickstarted our friendship and made us bond over so many more things that we had in common following. Maybe that's part of the reason why I like it so much, but listen, I'm sentimental. It's gonna happen. 2010 to 2012 is an extremely nostalgic part of my life, and I look back on it fondly. Remembering that Super Paper Mario was my first step into the world of fandoms just makes me love the series more and more as time goes on. Also, if it ever gets remade, I can actually die in peace. Let it be known that I will be passing away in my live reaction. Minish Cap may have been the first Zelda game that I was introduced to, but the award for my all-time favorite Zelda game has to go to the king of GameCube games, and that's Wind Waker. Boo, tomato, tomato? Maybe? I don't know. Is that a hot take? I don't care. To me, it's the king of GameCube games. There's just something about the music, cutesy style, and the world that just pulls me in more than any other Zelda game. Again, maybe it's because of the friends I had around the time that were just as obsessed with Zelda as I was, thus pulling me into Wind Waker hell with them, but even after all these years and playing games like Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword, and Tears of the Kingdom, it's remained at the top of my list ever since. Though, I will say, this wasn't always the case. Back when I first got my GameCube, circa 2004, my parents had bought me Wind Waker as one of my first games. I vividly remembered Outset Island, the pirate ship, and of course the Forsaken Fortress. But I'm embarrassed to admit, I actually never made it past the moblins in the fortress, and therefore never actually fully experienced the game before trading it in. That being said, I reclaimed my title and I beat the game later on in 2011. It was pretty great. I had so many fond memories of not knowing where to go in the game, and I would just pull up Chugga Conroy's Let's Plays of the game, and admiring how he knew literally every little secret. In fact, had I not picked up Wind Waker, I probably wouldn't have found Chugga's channel. He's one of my biggest inspirations for becoming a Let's Player, and it's safe to say had I not found his channel, I probably wouldn't have started doing this as a result. Wind Waker was just the catalyst for something much bigger. But anyways, back to the game and talking about how great the game is. Wind Waker lets you explore the ocean, finding and marking different island locations on your sea chart, and exploring was a big part of why I loved this game so much. There was a point in my life where I had the entire map completely memorized without the use of a sea chart, but now that other brain rot has infiltrated my brain, those memories have since faded. Some of my favorite moments from playing this game had to be sailing around during the halfway point of the game where the ocean was perpetually dark and trying to find Tetra and her crew. Another was the entire Wind Temple and how utterly amazing the vibes and the music were, and of course, you can't forget the amazing Mulgara music. But I think my all-time favorite moment in this game has to be the climactic fight with Ganon and the lead up to it. Tetra is revealed to be Princess Zelda, the King of Red Lions revealed to be the King of Hyrule, and of course the final fight with Ganon as the water's cascading down will always be such a fun and epic experience. It's crazy to think it's been 20 years since my first introduction to Zelda, and whenever I think about Wind Waker, I just remember sailing the oceans, salvaging for treasure, exploring the islands, and of course taking in the scenery as the sun rises up over the horizons. Just that is simple enough to put it in my top 3. I remember my dad telling me back when I was barely old enough to read that a video game with a kid who goes on adventures with Donald and Goofy was coming out, and I was beyond ecstatic. I was too young to play it for myself, so I watched my dad play the first Kingdom Hearts game, and it will forever be engraved in my mind as one of my all-time favorite experiences. This was back before YouTube and playthroughs were a thing, and he knew I'd be annoying about rewatching the cutscenes, so he recorded little VHS tapes of him playing through Hollow Bastion segments because he knew that they were my favorites. Despite our differing opinions on gaming nowadays, I'll forever associate this game as our game. Even if he may not know the emotional impact it's had on me, I always will. There's something about Kingdom Hearts that never seemed weird to me. Despite the concept of a Final Fantasy character walking around with a bunch of Disney characters being extremely strange and seemingly a crossover that would never happen in a million years, it just never came off that way to me. And maybe it's also because this game was my first introduction to Final Fantasy characters like Cloud and Sephiroth, but seeing them interact with the Disney characters still never felt strange at all. After a crossover as grand as this, I don't think anything else could ever be seen as weirder than this one. As a kid, well into my adolescence and teenage years, I wanted nothing more than to escape the reality of how boring and shitty life could be and just see distant worlds and hang out with people who would accept me. Similar to what I said about the last games, there was just something so endearing about dropping everything and going off on an adventure, not knowing where you'd end up. Sora, Riku, and Kairi were fed up with their daily routines and they wanted more, not even expecting the troubles that were gonna come their way. Something about that just resonated so much with me that I couldn't help not adoring this game's simple story and the characters within. Kingdom Hearts as a game means a lot to me. It's something that I was able to connect with my dad, cousin, and I made plenty of friends by bonding over this game. I'm always learning more about the game, even all this time later, and it truly never gets boring to replay. Even though I know what the characters say, how they say it, and what's going to happen, it still just feels so good to be able to go back and see it all again. My dad may have moved on from this game, and he may not know just how much of an impact he had on me, but to me, Kingdom Hearts will always be our game. How could I make a top 10 favorite games and at least not mention Minish Cap? Even though I prefer other Zelda titles to Minish Cap as I've grown older, that doesn't diminish you get it? The impact that it had on me growing up. It was my first ever Zelda game, Vadi was my first ever video game crush, and I eventually came up with my username because of this game. I don't want to spend forever on honorable mentions, but I do want to say that even if this is one of the easier Zelda games, not one of the flashiest or in-depth, and it's often a forgettable Zelda game in the grand scheme of things, I did enjoy my time with Minish Cap. After all, it did give me my username. Deltarune was a game that Jox and I recently played on the channel, and even with only 2 chapters being available at this point in time, I can safely say that it's well on its way to landing in my top 10. Undertale was already a phenomenal game, and Deltarune is a well-deserved sequel. The characters are unforgettable, the dialogue and banter is absolutely hilarious, and the plot is really starting to pull me in. One last praise I'll sing of this game is its music. God, the music! I already know this soundtrack is going to be at the tippy top of my Spotify Wrapped. You got bangers like the song that's playing in the background right now, World Revolving, Big Shot, The Legend, among many others. Though it was difficult for me to not put this on my top 10s list, I'm gonna give it a few years. Maybe later on, once all the chapters are released, I'm hopeful that there will be a spot on this list for Deltarune. This unassuming indie game was definitely one that grabbed me by the chest and proceeded to tear my heart out and stomp on it. Much like Journey, Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons makes you go on an emotional adventure, and even though it's over quickly, the impact of it stays with you. It's a simple story with simple characters, not the greatest graphics, but overall, I still enjoyed my time with it. So much so that I truly do think it would have landed a spot on this list. Not that Brothers was a bad game by any comparison, but there were just so many other games that I felt deserved the spot more than it. I was very back and forth because this game really does mean a lot to me. And hell, it even got a remake. I never thought that a remake of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons would happen, but it did, because it's just such a great game. But in the end, it was just shy of that number 10 spot. Anyways, without further ado, let's see my all-time favorite game. The year is 2007, and it's Christmas time. I was lucky enough to have gotten Explorers of Time on release, and I was having a blast playing it. We were having a Christmas party at my grandma's house, and while everyone was talking and enjoying each other's company in the dining room, I was huddled behind the sofa in the living room, trying my damnedest to defeat Primal Dialga. Eventually, I beat him, and I proceeded to then bawl my eyes out at the ending and continue to hide away from everyone so they wouldn't see me cry. Explorers of Time had become one of the best games I had played up until that point, so you can imagine my excitement when I found out just a few years later they were making a third installment with bonus content, new starters, and more plot. I was beyond obnoxious about this game. I quoted the characters all the time, I drew art of myself and my partner, I wrote fanfics, replayed the game so many times to experience the story again, and it never got tiring. Not once. I had experienced the Rescue Team games, and of course, I had Explorers of Time. But Explorers of Sky completely blew both of them out of the water. I could endlessly sing my praises about this silly game. The characters, the story, the music, the graphics, the gameplay, I seriously just love it all. Literally, the one and only thing I can think to even critique the game on is that you can't evolve until post-game, and maybe that there's way too many flashback scenes. And that's it. That's literally it. This game to me is perfect in every way. Maybe I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, but I suppose you won't see many flaws with your favorite game, huh? Even all these years after replaying the game tens of hundreds of times, it just doesn't get boring. Even after all the randomizers I've done, after all the hours I've sunk into all the Mystery Dungeon games and fan-made content, even after all that, it never gets boring. I could just sit there forever listening to the dungeon music, even feeling a little melancholic through it all, realizing that the child who loved these games is all grown up and living her life, and can still be happy. If you have one takeaway from this video, it's to just try this game for yourself. This game is best experienced for yourself. Name the hero after yourself and your partner, either close friend, pet, significant other, sibling, then just enjoy it. Take in the music, take in the story, do all the special episodes, see how the characters interact with everyone. Because this game is peak storytelling at its finest. I may be in the minority here, but I genuinely do think the Mystery Dungeon games are better than the mainline games. Sometimes there's nothing better than just being a silly little guy thrown into the world of Pokemon, destined to save the world from some batshit insane deity alongside your best bud. This game helped me meet so many amazing people on and off YouTube. It helped me pursue my passion as a content creator in both art and videos. Hell, I even helped moderate a silly Mystery Dungeon RP Discord because of my obsessive love for this game. And you know what? That's okay. If this game has taught me anything, it's to love your interests unapologetically. Throw your whole being into it. If it makes you happy, that's what matters. If a silly Pokemon spinoff can make me happy, and push me to be the person I am today, I think our joys in life must mean a little bit more than we give them credit for, right? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope my rambling wasn't too annoying, but I just really like talking about my favorite games. They may not be the biggest, flashiest, or prettiest games, but they're important to me. And I think that's what matters most in a game. If it can leave a lasting impact on you so many years later, I think it's worthy of being a favorite. If you enjoyed and you want to see more videos like this in the future, be sure to like and subscribe for similar content. I also do Let's Plays with my sister and other YouTubers, and occasionally do speed paints when I'm not too busy playing my favorite video games. If any of that sounds interesting to you, it'd be awesome if you stuck around. Anyways, thanks for listening to me gush, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And as always, stay kind to each other.